Good morning, good afternoon, and hello to everybody around the world. And thank you very much for joining us once again for another presentation of our webinar series, Hoppy Topics. Today we will talk about 5 ways to save money on hops and still brew amazing beer. My name is Frank Pfeiffer. I'm the technical director at Hopsteiner here in Germany. For everybody who's joining us today for the first time, I would like to give a very short, brief introduction. Our webinar is a free online seminar with presentations about various hop-related topics. All of us still have limited possibilities to travel and meet each other. And therefore, we'd like to additionally offer this kind of online support. In this way, we want to keep you up to date on our latest knowledge around hops. Before we start with the presentation, I would like to point out that we will be happy to receive your questions and comments after the session. During the webinar, your microphone and the camera remain switched off, but you can address your questions at any time through the Q&A tab on the control panel. I will pick up your questions at the end of the presentation. The presentation will take about 40 minutes, followed by the mentioned Q&A session. So in total, we will have about 1 hour. Here with us today, we have Stefan Reker, my colleague. He is our sales director and he's responsible for the Asian market. He's working for Hopsteiner also here in our German facilities. Stefan spent more than 20 years in the global flavor and beverage industry. Stefan is new to hop industry, but not new to beer. While living in Singapore and in Japan, he worked with many of the regional and global breweries. And he joined Hopsteiner in May 2021 and first had to learn a lot about hops and hop products. And now he's ready for the show. He knows everything about hops and he wants to share some of our latest knowledge with you and also with me. So Stefan, we are very curious about your recommendations on how to reduce costs in beer production and with regard to the application of hops and hop products. So Stefan, good luck and have fun.
Thank you so much, Frank. I don't know everything about hops, certainly not. Just enough, hopefully, on the cost aspect of it and how you can use the hop additions that you usually take and how you can optimize that, because cost control has always been a very important topic for any one of us. It has not become easier due to the COVID pandemic, of course. So here are 5 ways, as highlighted in the presentation title, that could help you to lift some of that cost burden and cost pressure by things which are in some cases a little bit more intrusive into your recipe and in some cases fairly easy to apply. So the presentation is going to focus on 5 different points. We're going to have an overview about taking the same hops that you use today, find other ways how to improve the cost relationship. We're talking about options to switch to other hop varieties, which may be very close in terms of the sensory profiles. We're going to look into the yields of the brew house and how to optimize those with customized products. And then we're also going to look at the loss side, which is an important cost driver, of course, and ways how to reduce that. Whatever we do and talk about here today, not all of this is going to be under the German purity law. Wherever I'm deviating from that purity law, I'm going to highlight that. But most of the things will be applicable worldwide with the product scope that we're going to look at. So when we talk about cost reductions and reducing your cost, of course, it depends on your current situation. So if you're basically using hop pellets or even hop cones to brew your beers, then there's going to be a very strong and significant impact that you could make with some of the proposals that we're going to talk about. If you have already pre-isomerized extracts using hop oils and other downward products, it's going to be a little bit narrower in terms of the cost-saving opportunities, but I'm sure there will be something in there for you as well. So without further ado, let's go into it, and let's see what can you do when you want to stick to the hops that you usually take for your beers, and how can you improve your cost bill in any way. But actually, there are three different options that you can go for. The first one is a little forward planning always helps, because it helps you to go into the demands whenever the cost situation in the market is favorable. And right now, the last harvest, especially in Germany and also in the US, was really favorable in terms of the hop situation. We had good harvests, we had good yields in terms of the alpha acid levels, and this strong last harvest is a good foundation for doing also long-term contracts, of course. So all the people we are dealing with who are doing long-term contracts usually don't cover 100% of their future years, because who can be that certain to cover really 100% of what you need going forward? But at least if you're covering a fraction, it will secure your prices going forward into the future. And then depending on really the extended volumes that you can talk about, it can also sweeten the deals, that's for sure. In a similar direction is the very important aspect of the transport costs. We know that logistic costs these days have increased dramatically, driven by COVID. It was at the beginning, we saw so many international shortages in terms of the capacity for transport, and also the costs which are associated with it. So these days, compared to 5 years ago, it's much more expensive to ship goods around the world. So whenever you are able to bundle those shipments into larger chunks, it obviously gives you a cost advantage. And it's something that you can do either if you have your own storage and warehouses, where you can have cold storage for the hops, which is required for most products. But an alternative to that could also be that you are talking with your local distributors and dealers, that you are make package deals with them and really use those local warehouses where capacity might be available. The third option to still continue using the same hops that you are used to would be to consider some of the older crops. There's usually a very stable demand in terms of the forward contracts. So the spot market in the hop world is usually limited to about 5 to 10%. The rest is really forward bound, and therefore something that is going away quickly. But there is changes in the recipes, changes in the brewers, and we might end up having some of the stocks from the last season or the year before. And of course, those years should go first, and that's why when you have an interest and you're not really dedicated to a specific harvest year, which is the last, then there might be an open discussion if there's some availability from previous years, which might sell a little bit cheaper. And since the shelf life that we give on most of our P90 pellets, for example, is 5 years, those harvests from 2019 and 20 are still perfectly good for use in the next couple of years. Well, but you might also find other ways how to save on the hops. If you're having your favorite hop types that you're using, the varieties, there might be some which are very similar to those, and some of those you might not even know because they come from different harvest regions. They come from different varieties which are not that popular. So let's look into this. What could we do with easier switches in terms of the hop varieties that you could use? The first and most important question to ask when you consider switching to other varieties is, how big is the sensory variation when you have a batch to batch difference? So usually we say that from the different harvest years, the quality of one variety is pretty stable, but you do have your differences. You even have your differences between the different harvest areas, the areas of origin, not even talking about different countries of origin where you can get for example, a variety like Cascade, you can get from the US, you can get it from Germany as well, and they will differ slightly. And that's something to consider, even if you have the same identity as a variety in your recipes, you will have your variations anyway. And you will always see that when you do the quality testing for your hop shipments. And therefore, the question is valid, I think, to ask, is a hop-to-hop variation from one variety to another maybe even smaller than staying within one variety and having to live with different origins or different years? And that's something that is obviously only to be tested in your brewing trials. And it's also going hand in hand with the selection of the hops that you take. We know that some of those fancy hops, which are branded and proprietary to some of the producers, they don't come cheap. In some cases, it's very well established because those hops are in many different recipes. But maybe there are less well-known varieties, which could give you a similar impression in the beer's sensory profiles, which we could talk about. Maybe there are less well-known harvest areas and origins that you could think about. And we are very happy to guide and support you with some propositions and proposals what to use instead if you are using your current hop regime. Another area where you could save money if you're actually doing this is whenever using aroma hops early in the brew, in the kettle and in the hot zone, it obviously gives you a very mild and pleasant bitterness profile. But hand to the heart, this comes at a price, because when you use aroma hops, which come with very low alpha levels in most cases, it is a premium to create that nice bitterness profile. So when you switch to bitterness hops for those purposes, it usually comes with a lot of cost savings. And if you're missing some of the fine nuances that you get from bittering with aroma hops, then there's no clear cut to have 100% yes or 100% no. You can go for blends, and with all of those three options that we have here on the paper, if you do just a share and a split in your brewing recipes, then you can already save some money, which could help at the bottom line. But let's look into the brew house and what's happening there with the different kind of products that you are using and the different kind of products that the industry and we at Hopsteiner have developed to optimize that. If you look into the way and the reason why we're using hops, there are many different aspects to this. And you as brewers will know that very well. Consumers will know many of those benefits as well. If you look to the obvious, hops gives you great aroma, it gives you bitterness, it gives you also this preservative effect by killing bacteria and making your product more stable in the shelf, and it helps establish a very stable foam which clings to the glass and just looks nice in those countries where this is appreciated. For the brewer's perspective, very technically look, you have those benefits of supporting the troop formation. You can help the precipitation of the protein fall out so that you can clear your beer, and unless of course you do a Hefeweizen or any other cloudy beer style where you don't want to have that clarity. But overall, hops is supporting the drinkability also and creating what we all want to have at the end, which is happy consumers favoring our beers. All of those benefits basically come from the hops, and more specifically, it comes from the lupulin glands, which are in the hop cones. See it on the right-hand side here in the picture with those little yellow bubbles in there. Those are the lupulin glands. And in this lupulin, there's basically two big areas of ingredients. One is the whole raisin part, where you have the soft and the hard raisins. And those are the drivers of the bitterness mainly, and all the associated benefits. And then you have the aspect of the hop oils. We'll come later to this aspect as well. The main purpose of brewing with hops is to free this lupulin out of the hop product that you get, so that it can do the performance and help you achieve the benefits that you see on the left-hand side. That's obvious. Now, when you look into the products that you can generate out of this hop cone, there are different varieties and different types, what you can achieve and how easy it will be. If you take the hop cone 100% natural as it is as the basis, then you can move downward in terms of the processing of those hop cones. And the further away you get from them, the more different will the outcome be. So the traditional P90 pellets are very close in the composition to a hop cone. It's just compressed and made a little bit more efficient in terms of the storage, in terms of the availability of the ingredients in the beer brewing as well. When you have the compressed and condensed lupulin pellets, or the P45 pellets, we know that some of our competitors call these by fancy names as well. Let's just say all of those P45s are basically done at cryogenically low temperatures to prevent the lupulin from cloaking. So this is a compressed version, which makes it easier available in the wort and in the brewing process. But the composition is not 100% the same anymore as in the hops because it's concentrated on the lupulin part. There's one form of extracts which we promote here at Hopsteiner very well is the ethanol-based total resin extracts. Ethanol always sounds bad because it comes with taxes, it comes with ethanol content, which is changing your beer's alcohol content. Well, not so much in this case, because those ethanol-based extracts carry only less than 0.0% of alcohol in the final product. And if you dilute this into your wort in the beer, it's basically gone. So don't worry about residual alcohol content coming from this kind of extracts. What it is very close to the composition of the hop cone, but not so different from the more popular product, which is the CO2-based extract, which still comes with more or less the same composition as the original hop cone, but changes in various aspects already. If you then go further downstream, you have all those pre-isomerized products, and here's where we clearly leave the Reinheitsgebot, the purity laws. These are the products which go further processing and therefore are not considered beer ingredients in the German market and some other German-speaking countries, of course. But if you compare the composition of those products, you see where the differences are. And the main differences are really in the composition of all those resins, the soft and the hard resins. You see it in the total resin extract is almost the same composition as in the original hop cone and the type 90 pellet, which is the closest in composition. In the CO2 extract, it's a little bit reduced, but you have the majority of the ingredients, which are the alpha acids, the beta acids, and the hop oils, and they are more or less all the same across those different products. Now, what can we do with that? Knowing that those products differ a little bit, we also can see the performance of their use in the wort and in the brewing process. So if you want to save money and start from using either conventional hop cones or already P90 pellets, switching to the enriched P45 or lupulin pellets is already giving you a small advantage. Why? Because the lupulin is easier dissolved in the wort and it's easier, more performing in the beer. The differences in cost will not be extreme though. Let's not kid ourselves. It's going to be a little bit in the big scale, but on the small scale, it's not going to be a big difference. If you switch from the pellets to a CO2 extract, that's going to give you some cost advantage already. Knowing that you don't get 100% of all the goodies from the hop cone and the pellet, vegetative matter is not there anymore. So when it comes to the troop formation, for example, it's not going to give you the same benefit. But overall, for the sensory outcome of the beer, it's basically the same. If you want to extend the savings a little bit further, then you can look into those total resin extracts. And if you were following the page before, whereas the total resin extract were closer in composition to the pellet and the hop cone, the CO2 extract was down, well, that was just in terms of the performance, not in terms of the cost, because Those total raisin extract have one big advantage. They don't depend on pellets being produced as the starting material. So what we do is basically extracting the hop cones, saving this processing step, and therefore also saving money, which we of course forwarding to you if you are buying this kind of products. So those are the conventional products, which are well under the German purity law, for example. But there are other options, of course, if we are leaving the purity law area, and those come from the pre-isomerized products. And in the picture you see here, you can have the comparison of the yield and utilization in the brew house and how quickly it happens during the beer process, the boiling of the wort. And you see here, when you're using conventional products like the pellets type 90 or also CO2 extract, it's basically taking some time. So it needs to be cooked and it needs to trigger the process which we are after, which is transforming the alpha acids into iso-alpha acids. This isomerization is basically the source of the final bitterness, because alpha acids as they are, they only have 10% of the bitterness of an iso-alpha acid. But for that isomerization to happen, you need temperature, you need time. That's why you're adding bitter hops very early into the brew to help support that process of the conversion. You don't have to go through that if you're using pre-isomerized products. See here the iso pellets and the isomerized kettle extract, IKE, they're basically almost immediately there in terms of the iso acids. It's even the other way around. If you add them early, you lose some of this bitterness and the iso acids because they degenerate a little bit. So those products are usually added quite late in the boil, and that's something which we are usually always recommending. What's happening with that is, yes, you do transfer the bitterness, but you're also keeping the aroma, because you know that we talked about it some minutes ago. You could use aroma hops to provide you the bitterness, which is a nice bitterness, but comes at a price. Whenever you do that, you're basically vaporizing the aroma oils in the same process, because the longer you boil, the more of the aroma coming from the hop oil will go into thin air. And that's something which we, in usual cases, would like to prevent, of course. If you extend that product spectrum a little bit further, you have a comparison of basically all the major products here on this picture. Taking their utilization, which is focusing very much on that bitterness impression and the provision of the bitterness into the wort. With the leaf hops, it's very difficult to get to the lupulin and basically make it available in the brew. Now, if you move forward, you use pellets, it becomes a little bit better. But if you're in a conventional brew house with conventional products, which are not pre-isomerized, as I mentioned, you're always limited to an extent of 30 to 40% maximum yield. The best brew house in the world would hardly go beyond that 40%. Totally different when you use downstream products, because there you basically getting into the wort what you're paying for, which is the acid level, the alpha acid and the iso-alpha acid level. So when you look into products you use in the downstream area in the cold block, you have iso extracts, which are usually taken to fine-tune the bitterness only. You wouldn't have a beer bittered 100% with an iso extract, because the bitterness would just be too harsh, and therefore it's usually used up to 30% of the total IBU coming from that kind of product. And then you have other downstream products like the raw extracts or tetra extracts or alpha extracts, which you can use not only to fine-tune the bitterness, but of course also to help you improve the foam, which is something that is very important in some areas. And tetra and hexa and rho, those are the reduced alpha and iso-alpha acids, which makes them applicable in light stable beers as well. So if you're filling your beers in clear glass bottles, you would not want to have normal alpha acids or iso-alpha acids in those, because it will create that light struck flavor and really become a nasty taste experience for a consumer, which you don't want. So taking this picture up again with the sequence of how much we could save by using these different kind of products. If you go to pre-isomerized products, you are somehow in a different league because the savings compared to the conventional products are really significantly more. When you do the smallest change, you could use, instead of a normal P90 pellet, a pre-isomerized pellet. It has the benefit of basically bringing you all the benefits you have by using a pellet. So helping you with a tube formation, having all those different other ingredients in it, including the tannins and all the other aspects which you know from a conventional pellet. But it's just quicker in the release of the bitterness into your wort. Go a step further, you skip the vegetative matter that you have in the pellets and you go for the isomerized cattle extracts. Those are for the hop zone and are going to really give you an improvement in terms of the yield that you can get from those. The highest yield is in terms of the iso extract, but as mentioned, there's a limit to how much of this you can use. So therefore, usually we recommend a combination of an IC and an iso extract if you're going for a fully optimized downstream product in terms of the bitterness and the money you have to pay for that. So let's look into another aspect, and that one is one of the central aspects of brewing from my point of view. Because whatever you do, and you might remember that picture, whatever you do when you brew with hops, you always use a product which is a very versatile composition. So you have the hops and it has the lupulin in there, and in the lupulin are the raisins to give you the performance and the bitterness, and the hop oils. Now, this is a great advantage because it always comes in a pack. Also a very great disadvantage, however, because it comes in a pack and you cannot separate them in your brew house. What does that mean? Usually you're using hops in different stages of your brewing process. You consider the bitterness and the performance of most of the hop products, you add them in your kettle and you boil them with your wort. You can use them as well in the whirlpool, which is usually called the late hopping, or you go further downstream in fermentation, in storage, and you do your dry hopping, which can be either done with conventional pellets, or when you go even further downstream, you can do it with hop oils that are devoid of all those vegetative matter and give you the full aroma performance without any of the bitterness that comes with hop in one bundle. Now, the issue is you need to have that transformation of the alpha acids into iso-alpha acids if you stay with conventional products. So when you use your products in the kettle, you're basically vaporizing the aroma because you're cooking it off. Now, there's usually a very clear tactic, and that's something that every brewer will do. You decide when to add which hops. And you don't only have one addition of hops at the beginning, but you split your hop throughout the brewing process, in the boiling at the kettle, but also later on. And this is mitigating this issue that you always have hops as one complete package. So those hops you add early, you consider losing all the aroma and just go for the bitterness, while as when you use the hops late, you consider there won't be enough time for the isomerization, so you lose the bitterness and you focus on the aroma. The issue is you certainly lose one of those. So actually, this is a very sensitive question. What do you prefer to lose, bitterness or aroma? And you can mitigate it, as mentioned, by using bitter hops, which are more cost effective only for the bittering, and only the aroma hops then later in the late or dry hopping. But still, it will be some of the value lost because hops are usually priced as well for the content of alpha acids they contain. And that's something that we could optimize, of course, if we're looking into a way out of that. You cannot do that in the brew house because hops comes as a combination, but we could do it one step before at Hopsteiner. We could split those products into the different distinct functions, and that's something that we basically do with all the downstream products, which are split into either the focus on the bitterness or the focus on the aroma part. And it's a big topic which should be maybe something for another webinar, which you already find on our YouTube channel when it comes to different technical solutions that we offer. But I want to look into another thing first, and that's the specific part of the dry hopping. Because in dry hopping, we are only looking for aroma, basically. We want to maximize the yield of the hop oil, which is in the hops, and bring it into the beer. And we know that this is not so easy because usually hops delivers hop oil, which is not the same taste as the taste of your beer that will come out when you use the hops in the brewing process. There are different aspects linked to that. First of all, hop oil as the major driver of the taste is change in terms of taste during the boiling process. We mentioned that. Temperature is an influence, solubility is an influence. So not all the components in the hop oil will make its way into the beer because some are just not water soluble. If they are purely oil soluble, you can get a little bit of it in it, but it will not be the same composition. Another aspect is the biotransformation. The biotransformation that happens when you use your hop in the fermenter, where the yeast is doing its part and changing the taste profile and the aroma profile of the hop oils, and therefore creating a very distinct outcome, which is not the same as the original hops. Now, most of you will know that from experience, and they will also know another thing when they work with hop pellets, and that is that using hop pellets in dry hopping is not so easy and not always fun. It starts with this hop that you add as a pellet or as expanding in volume. Up to 6 times in volumes, that sounds a lot already. If you consider the weight increase, it's even 12 times. Now, this blown up hops is so big because it soaked up your very valuable beer. And we usually say that with dry hopping with pellets, you can lose up to 30% of the beer. And if you use the pellets earlier, it will be the wort that you lose. If you add it later in the dry hopping, it will be really the beer, which is already dry hopped. So basically the most expensive loss that you can have. There's another aspect linked to using pellets in dry hopping, and that's getting the stuff out afterwards. And, you know that it's not very easy to remove the vegetative matter. Some of it might be separated by a centrifuge, if you have one of those, but it's not perfect. You could also use filters, but those will clog very quickly. So there is no real perfect way of getting hops out of your fermenter or the storage tanks, which is not messy. And let's consider this is something that we would like to overcome if we could. There's one way to do that. We developed a device we call the beer cleaner, and it's now named the Hopsteiner. And this could help you really significantly reduce the loss. The principle is fairly easy. You're taking a side stream of the beer, not the complete wort, not the complete beer, and you're saturating it to the maximum with hops. The beer flow is going into this device where the hop is. It's absorbing all the aroma part, and then you're leading it back into the mainstream or the main tank. Installing such a piece of equipment is something only for bigger breweries, though. If you have less than 10,000 hectoliters, for example, we would hardly recommend doing an investment like that. But it will help you significantly reduce your beer loss and therefore save you a lot of money in the long run. There is a easier and quicker way to achieve a similar thing. And that's by using hop oils. Because hop oils don't come with a vegetative matter. They also don't come with this extended bitterness, because some of the hop pellets, alpha acids, are going into your beer. And even though they're only 10% of the bitterness of an iso-alpha acid, they still will add to the IBUs you have. But there are many other benefits as well. First of all, you don't have the plant material in there. It cannot suck up your beer, so you don't lose it. And you don't have to remove it. Another advantage is in the supply chain. Those hop oils are very concentrated products. So instead of having tons of pellets in your warehouse at cold temperatures, you can store a much smaller amount of hop oil, and that will give you, of course, cost benefits as well in the shipment and storage overall. Another benefit that you have by not having vegetative matter in a hop oil is that there's no hop creep effect. So especially if you go for non-alcoholic beers, you don't want to have that extra fermentation and alcohol creation happening. But even if you're brewing conventional beers, you need to do a lot of testing to confirm the final ABV of your beer, because massive dry hopping with pellets also leads to some significant increase in the alcohol, as some of the sugars become available for the rest of the yeasts to consume and create alcohol. So there are many more benefits of using hop oils, and there's a separate webinar on that in our Hoppy Topics series, and you can find it on our YouTube channel. But so much for today, and I'm curious to get some of your questions now in seeing options how to save $1 here or there.
Yes, Stefan, thank you very much for this very nice presentation, high compressed information material regarding application of hop products in focus to reduce costs. Yes, my recommendation today will be, whatever you're doing, whatever you try to implement in your process to move forward in cost reduction, please have an eye on beer taste, on quality, and also on the analytical values that comes out of these changes. And we offer support, Stefan and myself, as presenting the technical part of Hopsteiner here in Europe. Ask us if you change something, we can help you. We can also have hand on the analytical implementation and so on and so on. So ask us if whatever you like to change in your brewery. So now we received some comments, and we also received some questions coming up regarding your presentation, Stefan. There's one guy and one customer, he's asking about total resin extract that is extracted with ethanol as solvent. And he asks, he knows the CO2 extract very well, but he has no information on the ethanol extract. And why are these not commonly offered?
Yeah, it's interesting question. I think has some historical reasons. CO2 extract has become not only in the hop industry, but in many other industries where it's used to extract botanicals or other food crops as well, has become a very popular technology, because it's free of basic solvents, and it's coming with a very clean taste profile in general. For the hop extracts generated by CO2, they come also with a very clean profile, but they don't carry over everything which is in the hop cone. The ethanol extracts, they're more difficult in the handling on the production side, because you're dealing with ethanol. Ethanol is a solvent which is under very strong governmental control, of course. So not everyone wants to have that in the factory. Think about explosive control measures and things like that. So not many people are really running this kind of equipment anymore, even though the outcome that you get from that is at least on par with the CO2 extract, or some might even call it superior in some cases. So taste-wise, if you're using CO2 extract or an ethanol extract, the total raisin extract, for the beer taste, it hardly makes any difference. So if you're using a CO2 extract today and you're interested in using a total raisin extract, it will be a very simple switch, I guess, from one to another, and giving you the same sensory profile for the final beer. But having this ethanol in there for the production side, it's some hurdle to take it on. For the user side, which is you in the brewing world, it's basically, as I mentioned in the presentation already, almost no residual alcohol in there. It's no dangerous goods. It's not different like a CO2 extract and a handling. So not really something which is should be as small as it is comparatively in the hop world. But,
Okay, Stefan, another question is coming up. It's regarding application of alpha extract. So alpha extract is a product that is standardized to 20% alpha acids, and this customer is asking about if you can use it in the brew house as well, and not only for downstream.
well, yes, you could use that. I guess you could easily use that, but you wouldn't, because the cost in use would not be as favorable as with a CO2 extract or another product like that. Because the yield that happens in the production of this isolated alpha acid is something that has to be priced in, of course, and therefore the overall cost per kilogram of alpha acid that you get is usually higher than when you have other extracts. That's why usually we take the alpha extract only downstream. You can use it to help increase your foam or stabilize it, and we're using it to fine-tune whenever you're not talking about light stable beers. Because if you have a light stable beer, you would rather take a tetra extract than that gives you the same performance as an alpha extract.
Yes, that's absolutely right, Stefan. And we have seen in one of your last slides that there are differences in the utilization of the addition point in between brewhouse addition and downstream addition, and that is because of the following losses in the brewing process that you always have when you have a addition in the kettle or in the whirlpool, and that you don't have when you do it very late. And please, any application of downstream products, included the hop oils, please do it before the last step of your filtration. Even if it's a safety filtration, it's okay, like a trap filter, but you need something in between the filter and the BBT or the packaging area. Okay, it looks like that all the people are satisfied now and got sufficient information. If you have questions coming up, rising later on, please contact us. We will answer everything. It's posted via email. And yes, now we can close the session. And it was a very good session, very informative. And if you want to receive more information, want to see more information, you can also have a look on our homepage, the hopsteiner.com, where we have publications, technical publications, and also information regarding the webinar series Hoppy Topics. After we close the seminar now, we have the chance to give you a short, 2 questions for a short feedback. And if you want to do so, please give us this information on how you received and how you found this presentation for today. And you will also get a link, an email link, where you have the option to watch this video again, to have a look inside, more relaxed, to pick up something again, for better understanding maybe regarding the topic of today. So finally, I would like to say about the next webinar that will start or will have on the 5th of May here in Mainburg, and that will be given by our head of Plant Science and Breeding in Europe, it's Dr. Alexander Feiner. And he will talk about fieldwork, news from a Hopsteiner breeding program. So it will be very interesting, I swear. As well, we expect important information on development of new hop varieties in general, and also with an eye on quality and also with a very big eye on sustainability. So thank you now for today and joining the webinar. And I hope that you had a good time with us, enjoyed the webinar, and will give us the right positive feedback, I hope. And we are looking forward to meet you again soon in May. And until then, please stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.